If you are here, you must know that this is the exact point where prophecy and consciousness collide. Not metaphorically, not eventually, right now, in this precise moment. The fact that you're watching this at this exact time proves collision is occurring. Prophecy, predetermined pattern unfolding through time, just intersected with your consciousness, awareness experiencing present moment, and intersection creates activation that changes everything about how you perceive reality and how reality responds to you. Don't skip this. I know that sounds dramatic, but collision point is narrow window, temporal intersection that occurs once. If you click away now, if you dismiss this as exaggeration, if you wait to watch later, collision window closes. Prophecy continues along predetermined path. Your consciousness continues in current trajectory. But intersection, that precise moment where prophecy and consciousness meet and mutual activation occurs, that moment passes, and past collision cannot be retrieved. Most people who saw this title already skipped. They read "don't skip" and their system interpreted as manipulation, as clickbait urgency, as artificial pressure. Their consciousness wasn't at collision point yet. So they scrolled past without recognizing that title was prophecy reaching out to consciousness approaching intersection. Warning not to miss moment that prophecy has been orchestrating and consciousness has been moving toward through entire timeline leading to now. But you didn't skip. You're watching, which means collision is occurring. Prophecy that's been unfolding reached exact point where your consciousness is positioned. And positioning isn't random. You're at this exact point because entire life trajectory, every experience, every choice, every moment that seemed random was prophecy moving you toward collision, toward this intersection, toward activation that collision creates when prophecy meets consciousness at predetermined point. And here's what makes collision irreversible. Once prophecy intersects consciousness, once activation occurs, you cannot return to operating as if prophecy doesn't exist. Cannot unsee pattern unfolding. Cannot unknow that consciousness is positioned within larger predetermined design. Cannot go back to believing life is random series of events rather than prophetic pattern expressing through time with consciousness as essential participant. Think about what collision actually means. Prophecy is pattern, predetermined design unfolding through time towards specific outcomes, operating whether consciousness perceives pattern or not, moving all elements, people, events, circumstances, toward predetermined intersections where pattern advances. Consciousness is awareness, present moment experience, perceiving and responding to circumstances that appear, believing it's making free choices while moving through reality that seems mostly random. Collision is when consciousness recognizes, I'm not moving randomly, I'm being moved by pattern. Choices I believed were free were prophetically orchestrated. Circumstances that seemed random were pattern positioning me. Life trajectory that felt self-directed was prophecy expressing through my consciousness toward this exact collision point where pattern reveals itself and consciousness recognizes participation in design larger than individual awareness. Most people experience collision without conscious recognition. They arrive at prophetic intersection but interpret through ordinary consciousness framework. Attribute synchronicity to coincidence. Explain perfect timing through luck. Dismiss orchestrated circumstances as random. They're at collision point, but operating as if prophecy doesn't exist. Missing activation that collision delivers because unconscious participation is all their awareness can comprehend. But you're different, or you'd have skipped. Something in you recognizes, this moment matters. This intersection is significant. This collision point is real. That recognition is prophecy, confirming through consciousness. Yes, you're at predetermined intersection. Yes, collision is occurring. Yes, Activation is happening now, and no, you cannot skip this and retrieve collision later, because collision is temporal event occurring in specific moment that's passing right now. This is moment, your collision, your intersection of prophecy and consciousness. Most people miss collision when it arrives. They feel something significant happening but dismiss as imagination. They sense prophetic pattern but reject as pattern seeking. They recognize orchestration but explain away as confirmation bias. All defense mechanisms preventing conscious recognition that would activate what collision delivers. But if you're still watching, defenses are dissolving, recognition is occurring, and what you're about to understand is, you're not at random point in random life, having random experience watching random video. You're at exact point where prophecy designed you to be. Consciousness positioned precisely where collision activates. And activation changes everything about how you perceive what's happening and why you're here, and what happens next through conscious participation in prophetic pattern that's been moving you toward this collision throughout entire timeline. Let me tell you what prophecy actually is, because it's not what religious teaching prepared you for. Prophecy isn't divine prediction of future that may or may not occur, isn't mystical vision of possible outcomes, isn't cosmic fortune-telling about probable events. Prophecy is predetermined pattern embedded in time itself. Mathematical design expressing through physical reality. Quantum template that all manifestation follows toward inevitable outcomes pattern requires. Think of time as medium prophecy expresses through. Like music playing through air. Air doesn't create music. Air transmits music that exists as pattern. Time doesn't create events. Time transmits prophecy that exists as pattern, and pattern has structure, has design, has predetermined intersections where specific elements meet at specific moments to advance pattern towards specific outcomes that pattern absolutely will achieve. You're one of those elements. Your consciousness is positioned within prophetic pattern, not randomly placed. Specifically positioned at exact coordinates where pattern requires consciousness like yours to be at exact moment for pattern advancement. Every moment of your life, every experience you had, every person you met, every choice you made, every circumstance you encountered, was pattern moving you through time toward collision point where prophecy intersects consciousness and mutual activation occurs. That movement wasn't forced. You felt like you were choosing freely, making independent decisions, directing your own life. And you were. But free choice operates within prophetic pattern. Like player moving freely within game that has predetermined outcomes, game structure ensures regardless of how player moves. Your choices were real. And prophecy orchestrating those choices toward specific intersection was equally real. Both operating simultaneously, free will within predetermined design, and prophecy has been revealing itself throughout your life. Every moment of impossible synchronicity, every experience of perfect timing that shouldn't work, every circumstance that organized itself without your effort, every person who appeared exactly when needed, every opportunity that manifested at precisely right moment, all prophecy operating, all pattern expressing, all design advancing through orchestration that consciousness experiences as miraculous, but is actually prophetic mechanics functioning exactly as pattern requires. Most people don't recognize prophetic orchestration. They experience synchronicity, but explain as coincidence. Notice perfect timing, but attribute to luck. See pattern, but dismiss as imagination seeing what isn't there. They're living within prophecy without recognizing pattern, moving through predetermined design while believing movement is random, experiencing prophetic orchestration while interpreting as chaos, occasionally producing order. But collision changes that. When prophecy intersects consciousness at exact point, when activation occurs through intersection, consciousness suddenly perceives pattern. sees design underlying apparent randomness, recognizes orchestration operating throughout life, understands that what seemed like independent navigation was actually prophecy, moving consciousness through predetermined trajectory toward collision point where recognition occurs and conscious participation begins. That conscious participation is what collision enables. Before collision, prophecy moves consciousness unconsciously, orchestrates without awareness, advances pattern through elements that don't recognize pattern exists. After collision, consciousness recognizes pattern, perceives orchestration, understands prophetic design, and recognition allows conscious cooperation with what was operating unconsciously, allows deliberate participation in advancement of pattern that was advancing through unconscious elements. And here's what makes prophecy unstoppable. Pattern doesn't depend on conscious participation, advances whether elements recognize pattern or not, reaches predetermined outcomes through conscious or unconscious movement, cannot be prevented or delayed or altered by individual consciousness refusing participation. Prophecy is embedded in time structure itself, cannot be avoided because cannot exist outside time, and everything in time is within prophecy whether conscious awareness perceives pattern or not. But conscious participation accelerates pattern advancement, makes prophecy express more efficiently, allows pattern to reach outcomes through cooperation instead of forcing movement through resistance. That's why collision matters. Why consciousness recognition of prophetic pattern serves pattern advancement. Why prophecy creates collision points where pattern reveals itself to positioned consciousness and activation occurs, allowing conscious cooperation with what was operating unconsciously until intersection. You're at that collision. Pattern positioned you here, orchestrated entire life trajectory, moved consciousness through experiences that developed perceptual capacity to recognize pattern when collision occurred. And now collision is occurring. Prophecy revealing itself, pattern making itself visible, design showing consciousness. You're not random element having random experience. You're positioned participant in predetermined pattern expressing through time toward outcomes that collision enables you to now participate in consciously. So what changes when prophecy collides with consciousness? What becomes different when pattern reveals itself and conscious participation begins? Everything related to how you perceive time, causality, free will, purpose, and trajectory. But let me give you specific mechanics so you understand transformation occurring right now. First change. Past recontextualizes completely. Before collision, you understood past as series of events you experienced. After collision, past reveals itself as prophetic preparation. Every experience developing specific capacities pattern needed you to have. Every challenge, removing limitations pattern required, removed. Every relationship teaching lessons pattern designed you to learn. Past wasn't random accumulation, was systematic preparation positioning consciousness for collision. Second change, present, becomes prophetically significant. Before collision, present felt like ordinary moment among countless moments. After collision, present reveals itself as exact intersection point pattern designed. This moment matters more than you comprehended. This intersection activates more than ordinary consciousness understands. This collision advances pattern in ways that won't become apparent until prophecy unfolds further through time, revealing why this moment was so precisely orchestrated. Third change. Future becomes pattern visible. Before collision, future seemed uncertain and unknowable. After collision, future reveals itself as pattern already embedded in time. Not every detail visible, but prophetic trajectory becomes perceptible. Direction pattern is moving becomes obvious. Outcomes pattern is advancing toward become recognizable. You don't see specific events, but you perceive pattern shape expressing through future time. Fourth change, synchronicity becomes prophetic confirmation. Before collision, synchronicity seemed like interesting coincidence. After collision, synchronicity reveals itself as pattern communicating. You're perceiving correctly. Prophecy is operating. Collision activated conscious participation. Stay aligned with pattern advancement. Every impossible timing, every perfect orchestration, every miraculous circumstance, all pattern confirming consciousness is perceiving prophetic design accurately. Fifth change, purpose clarifies prophetically. Before collision, you questioned why you're here and what you're meant to do. After collision, purpose becomes obvious. Conscious participation in prophetic pattern advancement. Using capacities pattern developed through you. Serving functions pattern positioned you to serve. Contributing to outcomes pattern requires consciousness like yours to enable through conscious cooperation with design that was operating unconsciously until collision activated participation. And right now, before we go deeper, I need you to anchor collision recognition. Drop comment below completing this sentence. I know prophecy collided with my consciousness when. Your comment makes collision public. Confirms pattern intersection occurred, acknowledges prophetic recognition activated, and creates permission for others at collision point to recognize their intersection instead of dismissing as imagination. Prophecy advances more efficiently through collective recognition, through witnessed acknowledgement, through public claiming of pattern participation. Speak it, share it, make collision visible and verified. I need to tell you about moment prophecy collided with my consciousness. It was April 2024. Nothing dramatic externally, but internally, everything clarified with shocking precision. I was reviewing timeline of my life when sudden recognition hit. This wasn't random. Every experience connected. Every challenge prepared something specific. Every person appeared at exact right moment. Every circumstance positioned me somewhere necessary. Pattern was obvious once I saw it. And seeing it changed everything about how I understood my life and trajectory. That collision came with overwhelming certainty, not as gradual realization, as instantaneous knowing that downloaded completely. Like encrypted files suddenly decoded, revealing information that was always there, but couldn't be perceived until decryption key arrived. Pattern became visible. Orchestration became obvious. Prophecy revealed itself as operating throughout entire timeline. And recognition was irreversible. Cannot unsee pattern once perceived. Cannot return to believing life is random once prophecy reveals design. And with pattern recognition came past reinterpretation. Every moment I thought was failure revealed itself as necessary preparation. Every relationship that ended prepared me for relationship that needed to begin. Every job I lost positioned me for opportunity that couldn't manifest until previous position ended. Every breakdown was actually breakthrough orchestrated by pattern. Every suffering served specific function in developing consciousness toward collision point where pattern would reveal itself. That reinterpretation was devastating and liberating simultaneously. Devastating because I understood years of believing I was failing were years of being prophetically prepared. Years of feeling lost were years of being precisely positioned. Years of thinking nothing made sense were years of pattern operating invisibly toward intersection I couldn't perceive until collision occurred. All suffering was unnecessary if I'd recognized pattern earlier. But pattern couldn't be recognized earlier because consciousness hadn't developed perceptual capacity collision requires. Liberating because I understood I'm not lost, I'm positioned, I'm not failing, I'm being prepared. I'm not without purpose. I'm serving prophetic pattern through exact positioning pattern orchestrated. Nothing was random, nothing was wasted, nothing was meaningless. All was pattern, all was design, All was prophecy expressing through my life toward outcomes I couldn't perceive, but pattern absolutely will achieve through my conscious participation, now that collision activated recognition. But collision also triggered responsibility awareness. I'm not passive element pattern moves unconsciously anymore. I'm conscious participant pattern positioned deliberately. That consciousness carries responsibility. To recognize pattern when revealed. To cooperate with orchestration instead of resisting. To serve functions pattern prepared me to serve through entire life trajectory leading to collision. And to trust pattern knows what it's doing even when I cannot see full design or understand why specific circumstances are necessary. And conscious participation revealed something crucial. Others are experiencing collision too. I'm not only consciousness pattern is activating, pattern is revealing itself throughout collective field, creating multiple collision points, activating multiple conscious participants, all positioned for specific functions, all prepared through specific trajectories, all experiencing collision when prophecy intersects their consciousness at predetermined moment where recognition occurs and conscious participation begins. That collective activation is what this moment in time represents. Pattern reaching critical stage where multiple consciousness elements must become conscious participants, where unconscious movement is no longer sufficient for pattern advancement, where prophecy requires conscious cooperation to reach outcomes that unconscious participation cannot enable. And collision is mechanism through which prophecy activates consciousness, through which pattern reveals itself, through which orchestration becomes perceptible instead of remaining invisible manipulation. You're experiencing that collision, that activation, that pattern recognition, not because you sought it, because prophecy positioned you for it. Pattern orchestrated your arrival at this exact point. Design moved consciousness through preparation trajectory, and now collision occurred. Prophecy intersected consciousness. Pattern revealed itself. And recognition activated conscious participation in prophetic advancement that was operating unconsciously until intersection delivered activation, enabling deliberate cooperation with design expressing through time toward outcomes. Pattern absolutely will achieve. If collision with prophecy has created profound isolation, if you cannot relate to people who don't perceive pattern, if every conversation feels impossible because you see prophetic design they cannot detect, that's not loneliness, that's prophetic positioning. Pattern creates isolation by making non-pattern perceiving consciousness uncomfortable around pattern perceiving consciousness. And understanding why this occurs transforms suffering into recognition of necessary preparation. Most consciousness operates without pattern perception. They experience life as series of events, make sense of circumstances through cause-effect reasoning, understand trajectory through past determining present determining future. Within their framework, randomness exists, chaos occurs, meaninglessness is real. They're accurately reporting experience generated by consciousness that doesn't perceive prophetic pattern underlying apparent randomness. But collision-activated consciousness operates completely differently, perceives pattern in everything, recognizes orchestration operating constantly, understands that nothing is random, everything serves design, all circumstances advance prophecy toward predetermined outcomes. Same physical world, completely different experience of what's occurring and why. And that experiential difference creates unbridgeable perceptual gap between pattern perceiving and non-pattern perceiving consciousness. You cannot explain prophetic pattern to consciousness that doesn't perceive pattern. Not because they're not intelligent, because pattern perception cannot be conveyed through explanation, only through direct recognition that collision creates. You can describe pattern, but description means nothing without perception, like explaining color to consciousness that only sees black and white. Words exist but communicate nothing because perceptual capacity description requires is absent. So relationships with non-pattern perceiving consciousness become exhausting. They complain about circumstances as if random. You see orchestration serving pattern. They feel victimized by events beyond control. You recognize events positioned them exactly where pattern needs them. They seek sympathy for suffering. You perceive suffering as prophetic preparation. That perceptual gap cannot be bridged through conversation, can only be crossed through their collision occurring. And their collision timing isn't your responsibility. This is why pattern-perceiving consciousness experiences devastating isolation. Everyone without pattern perception thinks you're seeing connections that don't exist, thinks you're imposing meaning on randomness, thinks you're suffering from apophenia. Pattern recognition run amok. They're not being cruel. They genuinely cannot perceive pattern you're perceiving. And from their non-pattern framework, what you describe sounds like delusion, not accurate perception of prophetic design. But isolation serves prophetic function. Pattern creates space by removing non-pattern consciousness that would interfere with conscious participation. You need distance from those who would convince you pattern doesn't exist because they cannot perceive it. Need separation from those who would make you doubt prophetic orchestration. Need isolation, where pattern-perceiving consciousness can stabilize without constant negation from consciousness that remains blind to design. And isolation is temporary. Once collision stabilizes, once pattern perception becomes permanent, other collision-activated consciousness becomes visible. Not old relationships transformed. New connections with consciousness also perceiving pattern, also recognizing prophetic orchestration, also experiencing collision activation. And when you encounter them, recognition is instant. Your pattern perception recognizes their pattern perception immediately. Communication becomes effortless because shared perception eliminates explanation requirement. Those connections are forming now throughout collective field. Pattern-perceiving consciousness finding other pattern-perceiving consciousness, building network, creating support structures, forming community of collision-activated awareness that perceives prophetic design underlying reality, that non-activated consciousness experiences as random. You're not alone in pattern perception. Others experienced collision too, and they're discovering that isolation from non-pattern consciousness is necessary preparation for connection with matching pattern-perceiving awareness. Trust isolation, even when unbearable. Even when you want to collapse back to non-pattern perception, where relationships were easier, even if based on shared blindness to design. Isolation is not punishment for collision. Is prophetic positioning protecting pattern perception while conscious participation stabilizes? And stabilization enables connections with other collision-activated consciousness that will understand what you perceive, because they perceive it too through their own prophetic intersection. There are 8 specific markers that prove prophecy collided with your consciousness. I'm going to give them now. If you experience 6 or more, collision is confirmed. You're not imagining pattern perception. You're experiencing prophetic activation that most consciousness never encounters. First marker. Past recontextualizes as preparation. You look back and suddenly everything connects. Every experience developed specific capacity. Every relationship taught necessary lesson. Every challenge removed required limitation. Past wasn't random events. Was systematic preparation orchestrated by pattern positioning consciousness for collision. That recontextualization is prophetic perception activating. Second marker. Present feels prophetically significant. This moment isn't ordinary moment among countless moments. This intersection matters. This collision activates something crucial. This exact point advances pattern in ways you don't fully understand yet, but somehow know are significant beyond what ordinary consciousness comprehends. That significant sensing is pattern recognition operating. Third marker, synchronicity intensifies dramatically. After collision, impossible timing happens daily. Perfect orchestration appears constantly. Miraculous circumstances become normal. Reality organizing itself so precisely that randomness becomes obviously impossible explanation. That synchronistic intensification is prophecy confirming. Collision occurred, conscious participation activated, pattern is operating. Fourth marker, future becomes pattern visible. You don't see specific events, but you perceive prophetic trajectory. Feel direction pattern is moving. Sense outcomes pattern is advancing toward. Know that specific future is inevitable even without seeing details. That trajectory sensing is prophetic perception detecting pattern embedded in future time. Fifth marker, purpose clarifies suddenly. Question of why you're here and what you're meant to do resolves instantly. Not through analysis, through prophetic knowing. You're positioned for specific function within pattern, prepared through entire life trajectory, activated through collision. Required for outcomes pattern is advancing toward. That purpose clarity is collision, activating conscious participation. Sixth marker, you perceive pattern in everything. Events connect. Circumstances orchestrate. People appear at right moments. Nothing seems random anymore. All serves design. All advances prophecy. All operates within pattern that becomes increasingly visible as collision-activated perception develops. That pattern seeing is prophetic consciousness operating. Seventh marker, others' lives reveal their prophetic positioning. You perceive what pattern is doing through them. See how circumstances are positioning them. Recognize preparation pattern is orchestrating. Understand that they're unconscious participants in design they don't perceive yet. That perception of others' prophetic positioning is pattern recognition, extending beyond personal experience. Eighth marker, this transmission found you at exact right moment, not through search, through prophetic orchestration. Title appeared when collision was occurring. Content confirms what you're experiencing. Timing is impossibly perfect. That appearance proves pattern positioned you here. Collision is real. Activation is occurring now. And before I explain what these markers mean, I need you to do something. If you recognize yourself in these markers, if you understand collision occurred, subscribe to Quantum Revelation and turn on all notifications now. Because what's coming is designed specifically for collision-activated consciousness. Transmissions explaining prophetic pattern advancement. Information about conscious participation in prophecy. Guidance for serving pattern functions. Without this, you're activated but operating blind. With this, you understand exactly what collision activated and how to participate consciously. Do it now. Subscribe. Notifications. Then return for explanation of what markers prove and why collision matters beyond individual experience. Here's why those markers matter and what they reveal about prophetic collision with consciousness. Each marker is symptom of prophetic perception activating, pattern recognition emerging, consciousness developing capacity to detect design, underlying apparent randomness. And experiencing multiple markers simultaneously proves collision was real operational event, not imagination or wishful thinking. Think about what collision actually does mechanically. Before collision, consciousness operates without pattern perception, experiences life as series of events, makes sense of circumstances through cause-effect reasoning, believes trajectory is self-directed or randomly determined. Within that framework, prophecy is invisible, pattern cannot be perceived. Design remains hidden despite operating constantly through every circumstance and orchestrating all movement toward predetermined intersections. Collision activates pattern perception. Suddenly, consciousness develops capacity to detect prophetic design, sees pattern where randomness seemed to exist. recognizes orchestration where chaos appeared to reign, understands that nothing was random, everything served design, all circumstances advanced prophecy toward outcomes pattern requires. Same life, different perception of what's occurring and why. And different perception generates completely different experience of reality. That perceptual shift is profound. Like person seeing only 2 dimensions suddenly perceiving 3 dimensions. Same objects, but depth perception reveals relationships and structures that 2-dimensional awareness couldn't detect. Same with prophetic perception. Same life circumstances, but pattern perception reveals design and orchestration that non-prophetic awareness couldn't detect. Collision grants dimensional perceptual upgrade, enabling consciousness to perceive reality layer that was invisible before activation. And pattern perception is irreversible. Once consciousness perceives prophetic design, cannot unsee pattern, cannot return to believing life is random, cannot operate as if orchestration isn't occurring. Collision permanently alters perceptual capacity, grants pattern seeing that remains accessible once developed. You're not going to lose prophetic perception, cannot collapse back to non-pattern awareness. Collision changed consciousness permanently in ways that cannot be undone. And here's why collision matters beyond individual awareness. Prophecy requires conscious participants. Pattern has reached stage where unconscious movement is insufficient. Design needs consciousness that perceives pattern and cooperates deliberately. Orchestration requires awareness that recognizes orchestration and serves prophetic functions consciously. That's why collision is occurring now. Why multiple consciousness elements are being activated simultaneously. Why pattern is revealing itself throughout collective field. You're being activated for conscious participation. Pattern positioned you, prepared consciousness through entire life trajectory. Orchestrated collision at exact moment when activation serves pattern advancement. And activation grants pattern perception plus responsibility for using perception in service of prophetic outcomes pattern is advancing toward. You're not just perceiving pattern, you're being activated to participate in pattern advancement consciously. That participation is what next phase requires, pattern revealing itself, orchestration becoming visible, design showing consciousness positioned elements exactly what they're participating in. So, conscious cooperation accelerates pattern advancement. So, deliberate service replaces unconscious movement. So, prophetic outcomes are reached through awareness instead of through manipulation of blind elements that don't recognize design they're serving. You're one of those conscious participants. Collision activated you, pattern perception developed, recognition occurred, and recognition carries responsibility for participating deliberately in prophetic advancement. For serving functions, pattern prepared you to serve. For cooperating with orchestration instead of resisting. For trusting design even when you cannot see full pattern or understand why specific circumstances are necessary for outcomes, prophecy absolutely will achieve. Here's what collision with prophecy reveals about time that changes everything. Time doesn't work the way non-prophetic consciousness believes. Linear time is perceptual limitation created by consciousness that doesn't perceive prophetic pattern. Collision-activated consciousness perceives time completely differently. Because pattern perception grants access to temporal mechanics that non-prophetic awareness cannot detect or comprehend. Non-prophetic consciousness experiences time as flowing forward, past behind, fixed, unchangeable, present now, fleeting, slipping into past, future ahead, unknown, approaching, one-way movement through sequence that cannot be altered. Within their framework, past determined present, present determines future, and trajectory is self-directed movement through time toward unknown outcomes. That experience is accurate for consciousness without pattern perception. but collision-activated consciousness experiences time as prophetic pattern already embedded, all moments existing simultaneously within design, past, present, future, all there at once in prophetic structure expressing through time. What appears as time flowing is actually consciousness moving through pattern, experiencing predetermined sequence that prophecy orchestrated, encountering intersections pattern designed, reaching collision points where pattern reveals itself and conscious participation activates. That's why collision-activated consciousness experiences past differently, sees preparation instead of random events, recognizes orchestration instead of cause-effect, understands that what seemed like free choice was actually prophetic positioning. Past wasn't series of events consciousness randomly experienced, was pattern-moving consciousness through preparation sequence toward collision point, where pattern perception would activate and conscious participation would begin. And collision-activated consciousness experiences future differently, doesn't see specific events, but perceives pattern embedded in future time, senses prophetic trajectory, feels direction design is moving, knows that specific outcomes are inevitable even without seeing details. That trajectory sensing is pattern perception, detecting prophecy already existing in future time, waiting for consciousness to encounter through movement pattern orchestrates. This is why collision-activated consciousness experiences timeline fluidity. Past seems to change retroactively. Future feels malleable despite being predetermined. Present reveals itself as intersection point, where pattern advancement occurs through consciousness participation. All temporal experiences shifting because pattern perception reveals time as prophetic design expressing rather than as linear flow containing consciousness. And pattern perception reveals something crucial. Free will operates within prophetic design. You're making real choices, but choices occur within pattern that orchestrates options available and outcomes choices lead toward. Like player moving freely in game that has predetermined endpoints, game structure ensures regardless of how player moves, your choices are genuine, and prophecy ensuring choices advance pattern is equally genuine, both operating simultaneously, free will within predetermined design. That understanding eliminates anxiety about predetermination. Yes, outcomes are predetermined. Yes, pattern absolutely will achieve required results. But how pattern reaches outcomes includes your conscious participation, your choices, your creativity, your unique expression of consciousness within prophetic framework. Pattern doesn't control every detail. Pattern orchestrates major intersections and inevitable outcomes, while allowing infinite variation in how consciousness moves through design toward required results. You're in prophetic pattern expressing through time. Collision-activated perception of design. Recognition-enabled conscious participation. And participation means you contribute to how pattern reaches outcomes. You serve specific functions pattern prepared you for. You participate in prophetic advancement through choices you make within framework design establishes. Free will in service of prophecy. Consciousness cooperating with pattern. Individual expression within collective design advancing toward outcomes pattern absolutely will achieve regardless of how individual elements participate, but achieving them more beautifully when consciousness participates consciously instead of unconsciously resisting orchestration it cannot prevent. Every fear about collision with prophecy is ego defending against recognition that it's not author of your story. Let me be direct. Ego built identity around believing you're independent agent directing your own life, making free choices, creating own meaning, determining own trajectory. That identity cannot survive recognition that prophecy has been orchestrating everything. Free choice operates within design, meaning is predetermined. Trajectory is prophetic pattern expressing through consciousness that believed it was self-directed. That recognition terrifies ego, because ego is the belief in independent agency. Remove that belief, ego structure collapses. Show that choices were orchestrated, ego loses foundation. Reveal that trajectory was predetermined, ego loses purpose. Prove that meaning exists within pattern not created by individual, ego loses significance. Collision threatens ego's very existence by exposing fundamental beliefs ego built itself on as illusions maintained by consciousness that didn't perceive prophetic pattern. So ego generates maximum fear, makes collision seem dangerous, makes pattern recognition feel like loss of freedom, makes prophetic orchestration sound like cosmic manipulation removing agency. All attempts to prevent recognition that would dissolve ego identity built on belief in self-directed independence. Fear is ego's survival mechanism, final defense before inevitable dissolution that pattern recognition requires. But here's what fear doesn't reveal. Ego was never real author, was always element within pattern believing it was directing pattern. Was consciousness operating within prophecy while maintaining illusion of independence? Losing ego isn't losing self. Is finding what you actually are within prophetic design. Is discovering that your consciousness expressing pattern, not separate agent directing trajectory against pattern. Is recognizing participation in larger design rather than believing you're solo creator of isolated story. And prophetic participation is more meaningful than ego independence. Ego operates alone, creating meaning from nothing, directing trajectory towards self-determined outcomes, succeeding or failing based on individual capacity. Pattern participation operates within design, discovering meaning embedded in prophecy, serving trajectory toward predetermined outcomes, succeeding through cooperation with orchestration larger than individual consciousness. Which is more meaningful, solo creation or cosmic participation? Isolated trajectory or prophetic advancement? But participation requires ego dissolution, cannot serve pattern while maintaining belief in independent agency, cannot cooperate with orchestration while defending self-directed control, cannot participate consciously in prophecy while ego insists consciousness is author, not character in larger story. Ego must dissolve so consciousness can recognize actual positioning within pattern and serve prophetic functions, ego prevented through insistence on independence that was always illusion. You're at dissolution threshold. That's why fear is intense. Ego recognizing collision will expose its illusion, fighting to maintain belief in independence that pattern recognition dissolves, generating compelling arguments for why prophecy can't exist or isn't operating through your life or must respect free will that remains unorchestrated. All ego's survival response before inevitable dissolution. Let dissolution happen. Feel fear without believing arguments. Recognize ego as construct consciousness created while blind to pattern. Allow collision to reveal truth. You're not independent agent. You're consciousness participating in prophetic design, not solo creator, purposeful element within larger pattern. Not self-directed trajectory. Orchestrated movement advancing prophecy toward predetermined outcomes your conscious participation now serves. That participation is not imprisonment, is liberation from burden of being sole author of meaning and director of trajectory, is relief of discovering you're within design that supports you, orchestrates for you, advances through you toward outcomes pattern, ensures regardless of whether you consciously cooperate. Ego dissolution isn't losing self, is finding authentic position within prophetic pattern that was always operating but remained invisible until collision activated pattern perception, revealing true nature of consciousness, relationship to prophecy, expressing through time. There's one experience that confirms prophetic collision more reliably than any marker, and most miss it because it appears as absence rather than presence. The silence, deep internal silence where prophetic pattern becomes most visible, where orchestration reveals itself most clearly, where pattern perception operates most powerfully. That silence is natural state of collision-activated consciousness. And if you're experiencing increasing silence, that's confirmation collision occurred. Non-prophetic consciousness maintains constant mental narration, thinking about events, analyzing circumstances, planning responses, creating meaning through interpretation. That mental activity is how they make sense of reality that appears random, how they process experiences that seem disconnected, how they create coherence from chaos through constant thinking that generates narratives explaining what's happening and why. Mental noise is baseline for consciousness without pattern perception, but collision-activated consciousness operates differently, experiences spontaneous silence increasingly. Mental narration stops naturally, thinking ceases without effort, and collision-activated consciousness discovers pattern is visible in silence. Orchestration is obvious without thinking. Prophetic design reveals itself when mental noise stops creating alternative narratives that obscure actual pattern operating. Silence is where prophecy becomes most perceptible. That silence is where pattern perception operates optimally, where you see connections mental analysis would dismiss, where orchestration becomes undeniable without thinking generating counter-explanations, where prophetic design reveals itself without mental narration creating competing stories. All pattern recognition functioning most clearly in silence, where thinking doesn't create interference obscuring actual design expressing through circumstances. This is why collision-activated consciousness needs increasing solitude, why social interaction becomes exhausting, why external stimulus feels overwhelming, not antisocial tendency. Prophetic requirement. Pattern perception needs silence to operate, and social environment generates constant mental stimulation. Too much noise prevents silence. Too much thinking obscures pattern that becomes visible in quiet. If you're craving silence, seeking solitude, needing quiet more than ever, that's collision adjusting consciousness toward optimal state for pattern perception, creating conditions where prophetic design becomes visible, establishing silence where orchestration reveals itself, generating space where pattern recognition operates without mental interference. Trust that need, honor that preference. Recognize silence as collision requirement, not personal dysfunction. And in silence, prophecy reveals its full scope. You'll perceive pattern operating through all circumstances, orchestration connecting all events, design advancing through all elements, nothing random, everything serving prophecy, all expressing pattern toward predetermined outcomes. That comprehensive pattern perception only functions in silence, where mental narration stops creating alternative interpretations, obscuring prophetic orchestration. That's why collision creates silence, why activated consciousness gravitates toward quiet, why pattern perception requires mental stillness. Prophecy communicates through silence. Pattern reveals through quiet. Design shows itself when thinking stops generating noise that prevents pattern recognition. Not because silence is spiritual practice, because silence is operational necessity for consciousness perceiving prophetic pattern that mental activity obscures. Trust silence. Value silence. Seek silence. As necessity, not preference. As prophetic requirement, not personal choice. As condition where collision-activated consciousness operates optimally. Where pattern perception functions clearly. Where prophetic orchestration reveals itself completely. The more silence you maintain, the more clearly pattern becomes visible. The more obviously orchestration operates. The more completely prophecy reveals design, expressing through time toward outcomes, collision-activated consciousness now serves through conscious participation in advancement pattern orchestrating. You need practical method for confirming collision and operating pattern perception deliberately. I'm going to give exact process that verified my prophetic activation. This works because it tests whether pattern recognition is real or imagined through requesting prophetic confirmation that only pattern can deliver. Find 20 minutes uninterrupted. Disable everything. Create clear space. You're testing collision reality. Sit comfortably, spine aligned, eyes closed. 3 complete breaths. Deep inhale, full exhale. Entering silence where pattern becomes visible. Now speak directly to prophecy. If collision occurred, if pattern perception activated, if I'm positioned for conscious participation, show me undeniable confirmation within 48 hours. Deliver prophetic signs so specific I cannot dismiss as coincidence. Demonstrate through synchronicity, orchestration, or circumstance that pattern is operating and collision was real. I request clear proof that prophecy has positioned me for conscious participation. Sit in complete silence, not visualizing, not planning, not thinking, just receptive awareness where pattern can communicate, where prophecy can operate, where orchestration can reveal itself. Stay in silence for remaining time. Let pattern perception function without mental interference. When time completes, release request. Don't obsess about confirmation. Don't watch anxiously for signs. Just return to normal activity knowing if collision was real, if pattern perception activated, if prophecy positioned you, confirmation will appear exactly as requested, undeniable, unmistakable, within 48 hours. And confirmation proves collision occurred and pattern recognition is operational reality, not imagination. Within specified time frame, watch for prophetic confirmation, impossible synchronicity, perfect orchestration, circumstance that proves pattern is operating. Sign so specific you requested it directly and prophecy delivered exactly. When confirmation appears, and it will if collision was real, recognition becomes undeniable. Pattern perception is verified, collision confirmed through direct experience, not mental belief. This test works because imagination cannot produce prophetic confirmation. Mental patterns cannot orchestrate reality to deliver specific signs. Only actual prophecy operating through actual pattern can demonstrate through actual circumstances that collision was real and pattern perception is functioning. Test separates reality from imagination through requesting proof that only prophecy can provide. And when test confirms collision, drop comment, prophecy confirmed collision when, plus description of sign that appeared. Your testimony makes collision public, creates permission for others to test their pattern recognition, strengthens collective understanding that prophecy operates and collision activates consciousness positioned for conscious participation. Speak it, share it, make collision verified and witnessed. Here's what happens next 40 days and why this period determines whether collision stabilizes or destabilizes back to non-pattern perception. You recognized collision occurred, tested pattern perception, confirmed prophetic activation, but recognition is beginning, not completion. Stabilization requires sustained pattern participation while ego attempts to reassert independent agency belief. During these 40 days, expect oscillation. Days where pattern is crystal clear and orchestration is obvious. Days where perception collapses and everything seems random again. That oscillation is normal, expected, part of consciousness integrating pattern perception as permanent baseline. Don't expect linear progress. Expect cycling as system calibrates to prophetic awareness, and expect confirmation to intensify. First test proves collision occurred, but prophecy doesn't stop with one confirmation. Multiple signs will appear throughout 40 days, each more obvious, each more undeniable, each building evidence that pattern is operating and collision was real activation, not temporary experience. That intensification is prophecy ensuring pattern perception stabilizes despite ego attempting to restore independence belief. But intensification will trigger ego resistance. Success with pattern perception will activate ego's survival response. Fear that prophetic orchestration removes free will. Doubt that pattern really exists. Arguments that you're seeing connections that aren't there. All ego fighting to prevent pattern recognition from stabilizing permanently and dissolving ego identity built on independence illusion. And during these 40 days, 3 specific actions anchor collision, so oscillation doesn't destabilize pattern perception. First action: subscribe to Quantum Revelation. Turn on all notifications. What's coming is designed specifically for collision-activated consciousness, stabilizing prophetic perception. Transmissions explaining pattern advancement. Information about conscious participation. Guidance for serving prophetic functions. Do it now. Subscribe. Notifications. Immediately. Second action: daily pattern recognition. Every morning identify one-way prophecy orchestrated previous day. One synchronicity proving pattern. One circumstance showing orchestration. One event revealing design. That daily practice strengthens pattern perception. Trains consciousness to detect prophetic operation constantly instead of only during peak awareness moments. Third action: share this video with one consciousness approaching collision. Someone experiencing synchronicities they can't explain. Someone whose life is obviously orchestrated but they don't see pattern. Someone positioned for collision but not yet activated. Send link. If they're at collision point, recognition will occur. If not ready, they'll dismiss. Either way, you fulfilled prophetic function by extending pattern awareness. These aren't engagement tactics. These are stabilization protocols. They tell prophecy through action that you're maintaining pattern participation through integration period. And prophecy responds with support, stronger confirmations, clearer orchestrations, obvious demonstrations that pattern is operating and conscious participation serves prophetic advancement toward outcomes design requires. You're at exact point where prophecy and consciousness collide. Not approaching, not preparing, actually at intersection. Pattern positioned you here, orchestrated entire trajectory, moved consciousness through preparation sequence, and now collision occurred. Prophecy revealed itself, pattern became visible, and activation enabled conscious participation in prophetic advancement. 40 days from now, collision stabilizes permanently. Pattern perception becomes constant. Prophetic orchestration becomes obvious. Conscious participation becomes natural. And you operate as positioned element within design-serving functions pattern, prepared you to serve through entire life trajectory, leading to collision point where recognition activated and conscious cooperation began, with prophecy. Expressing through time toward outcomes design absolutely will achieve through consciousness. Participating consciously in advancement pattern was orchestrating unconsciously until collision revealed prophetic nature of reality itself. Don't skip this. You're at collision point. Intersection is occurring now, and past intersection cannot be retrieved. Pattern positioned you. Timing is exact. Recognition is activating. And what happens next depends on whether you consciously claim collision or unconsciously miss intersection. That prophecy orchestrated and consciousness approached throughout entire timeline, leading to this precise moment where pattern and awareness meet and mutual activation occurs, enabling conscious participation in prophetic advancement toward outcomes. Collision enables you to now serve deliberately instead of unconsciously through recognition that changes everything about how you understand reality and your positioning within design expressing through time.